The National Education Union has accused the government of creating chaos and confusion in schools, saying there is a rising sense of panic in the education sector over COVID-19. The latest government advice is that children who develop a continuous cough or fever while at school should be sent home, but schools should remain open unless directly advised to close by Public Health England. Well, I'm joined now by Kevin Courtney. He is the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Could you tell us what is the current situation in the nation's schools at the moment? Because one hears reports of pupils not going to school, of teachers being sent home. I mean, how many schools are operating?
Well, we don't have good statistics on that, but we have very many anecdotes, so there are many children at home. Head teachers have had to send classes home because there aren't enough staff there to deal with them. When teachers are being told they have to self-isolate if they have the symptoms, when they're now being told that if they're in heightened categories of risk, but pregnant women have been told they should not be at school, people with COPD, with emphysema, with heart disease, with cancer, with HIV, with sickle cell. All of that means that there are very many staff who can't be in school, and we're facing either a chaotic close down of our schools or a planned one. Now, we think that the government has to bite the bullet and has to start closing schools. But we think there are also very many of our members who would volunteer on a different basis. Schools could be a community hub, could really help. We understand that, our fantastic NHS workers, they might need their children to go somewhere. The overlooked food distribution workers, they might need their children to go somewhere. Hopefully, we're going to repurpose some factories to be producing ventilators, as Matt Hancock suggested on Sunday morning, and that there will be children who need to be at school, but they can't be. We can't think it's as normal. It seems obvious to us that the GCSEs and the A-levels just aren't going to work. This is when children are maybe doing 35 hours of exams for GCSEs across a couple of weeks at what looks like it's going to be the very peak of the exam season. And at the moment, schools are confused because they are thinking that they are still trying to educate children for those exams that we think won't happen, and the government has to bite the bullet and then allow schools to repurpose themselves to do something else with volunteer staff who aren't in those vulnerable categories doing something useful for our society.
So what you're really saying is you'd like the government to say schools should close now and stay closed as the schools that we know indefinitely beyond the Easter holiday.
Yeah, we can't predict how long that closure would be for. We've asked the government to release the modelling of different periods of school closures. It seems odd that our country is so out of step with almost every other European country, but we would accept there could be evidence that schools being open is a good thing but we're not being given any evidence that that is the case, so modelling of different periods of closure. But as I said, it's absolutely odd. We're pleased now that Ofsted has at least had the good sense to stop inspecting schools because, head teachers and teachers need to focus on something else. This all applies to colleges as well as schools, but people need to be focusing on something else. The SATs exams this summer, they would be completely pointless. And the government should announce now that they're not going to happen in order that head teachers aren't worrying about those, but worrying about what really matters right now, which is making sure, for example, that children on free school meals will still get fed if the schools close for the normal operation, that we can find ways of still feeding those children. And as I say, looking after the children as some people really, we need to be at work for the rest of our society to come through this crisis together.
Can I ask you what level of discussions you are having with government, with ministers about the situation in schools?
Well, I regret to say that at the moment we're having many more discussions with the opposition parties than we are with the government. We do have staff who are talking to civil servants and there's good engagement there. But earlier this week, Gavin Williamson had a meeting with some unions and he excluded other unions from it. We're the biggest union of teachers and support staff in the country. We're the second biggest leaders union, but he didn't invite us to that meeting. We would very much like to be inside talking with Gavin Williamson about how we can put schools schools in a position where they can help. And we would be pressing in that with the voice of our head teacher members and our teacher members, that means they have to come up with something better than they're currently saying on the GCSEs and the A-levels, and they have to say that the SATs are not going to happen. They have to permit schools. But, I mean, when you say the exams are still going ahead, then what head teachers will do is exclude, and this is what we're hearing from many places, years 7, 8 and 9. They're keeping in years 10 and 11, the exam classes. That's not the sensible approach for us to take, and the schools are doing that because the exams still might be happening. It's not the right way to go about these questions at the moment.
OK, well, Kevin Courtney there, the General Secretary of the National Education Union, thank you very much indeed for joining us.